I take a lot of pleasure in sharing some information about Jean-Christophe with you today. He's currently the Senior Advisor of Strategic Development and Partnerships at the UN, Alliance of Civilizations in New York. He served as the Development Policy Dialogue Manager at the World Bank from 1999 to 2008. He's also the author of the La Europe à la carte, which I've read, and it's a fantastic book, a reflection of Europe, published on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And the contributions from the UN Secretary General and over 70 prominent leaders from around the world. So Jean-Christophe, I take pleasure and delight in recommending him as a fine human being who's travelled extensively and extremely committed to his work. He's very highly respected around the world. And before I ask him to come up to the podium, I'd like to let you know what it was that had me very, very interested in working with Jean-Christophe at a personal and an organizational level. In a world where we live so divided, screaming for some more unity, to find people who are uniquely dedicated to promote intercultural dialogue. When I met Jean-Christophe in Brazil at the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations Third Forum, what he talked about was we must find a way to engage the civil society and to bring the civil society to the global platform. So I am thrilled to have an association with Jean-Christophe, friendship and an understanding, and along with that comes learnings, but to create a global movement for intercultural dialogue. And it's my real pleasure to introduce Jean-Christophe today, who will share his perspective on the global intercultural dialogue, cultural diversity agenda. So I welcome Jean-Christophe.
Good morning, everyone. Your Highness, Ambassador Srinivasan, Chief Secretary Balakrishnan, thanks a lot for your extremely inspiring words this morning. I have really learned a great deal, and I think that your words are wonderfully offering us a vision for our debates for those 2 days, and wonderfully framing the debate, offering us a vision, and wonderfully inspiring. Dear Keke, dear Pese, thanks a lot for your extremely kind words. I'm afraid I certainly not deserve so much laudative words, and actually it reminds me a few years ago I was attending a lecture by a very prominent professor from Harvard University, and who became later on a Nobel Prize. And the chair introduced him in a kind of very flourish and very extraordinary words. And so the professor, when he took the floor, said, "What's said about myself?" Because my father would have been extremely proud of what you said. And my mother would have even thought that it was the truth. So thanks a lot for your extremely kind words, and it's a great pleasure, of course, to be here today in Trivandrum. It's also tremendous achievement and progress. Pese just reminded that actually our working and personal relationship, in a way, and friendship and trust, started less than a year ago, and in less than 1 year I think we have achieved a great deal in bringing together this entity of the UN Alliance of Civilization with civil society, with religious organization, leaders from different parts of the world. This movement started in Australia, in Melbourne, just 3 months ago, and then Keke took the torch and said, well, I will pursue the movement now in India, and who knows where it will pursue its way. And I think it's tremendously important that, as Ambassador Srinivasan reminded us before, the UN is kind of a big animal, and that sometimes it's important to put really some human content, and that the people themselves would really, in a way, appropriate the process. And actually, that is what I believe that we're trying to do together with GDF, with many other partners, and I would like to really congratulate the organizers to mention, to address this extremely important topic, bridging culture, building peace and development. And I think this is, of course, one of the most pressing issues of our time, is how to live together well in an interdependent world, and how to build inclusive societies beyond our differences. Let me also thank, with GDF, the other organizers, with Peace Work, with PNCA, and with SAGE, and it immediately came to my mind that in my language, I'm French, for those of you who have not really immediately figured out my terrible accent, but in my language, in French, sage means wisdom. And I think you have wonderfully named your foundation and thanks a lot also for your wonderful leadership. I would like, of course, on behalf of the Alliance of Civilization, to thank you for inviting me to address this forum and to create this extremely productive relationship. And indeed, the close coordination and synergy between government, between international communities, between civil society is the precondition to contribute, to bring relevant response and to achieve results and impact in reaching the goal of bringing people, communities, and culture together. I feel extremely embarrassed after what we have heard this morning. I feel extremely modest, and I think we sorry, I'm a bit confused here. Yeah, sorry. I think we need to address this issue with a great, and the vision of the emerging generation that will contribute, that will profoundly contribute, profoundly shape the debate. And in that respect, I would like to congratulate the authors of the essay competition. Some of you probably know that at the occasion of this forum has been organized an essay competition inviting youth from around the world to contribute a short essay, very concrete response on bridging culture, building peace and development. And I went last night through most of those essays. There were dozens and dozens of those essays, which were extraordinary, inspiring. And I must say that I was very impressed by the vision, the clarity, and sound analysis, but also the very concrete proposals that were put forward by many of them. And I would like to quote the winner of the essay, Stand Up Rituparna Malik, failed to create an understanding. And coming myself from the development community, I have also the absolute conviction that there is no way to achieve sustainable development. So I think the voice of the youth is probably one of the greatest priority for us in engaging those discussions. I would like also to congratulate the second best essay was Shaili Pandya, who is also, I think, with us, so I think she should also stand up. And Shaili came up with an extremely intriguing proposal to introduce a mandatory course on peace and harmony in all schools across nations for students in the age group of 11 to 15. And I think it's a great proposal.
And in any case, I don't want to unveil too much, the content of your papers, because we will have tomorrow a session where you will be invited to present. But I saw that at the occasion of this session, in the presence of very important people and in the audience, it was important to mention the extremely important contribution that you bring in this discussion. You are physically present, but also the dozen and dozen of others who have been doing this exercise, and by a way or another we will publish your papers, and we will also spread them around and see how some of the concrete proposals could be put forward to governmental organization and as a contribution to the debate. When I woke up this morning in my room at the hotel, and when I opened the curtain, I was just fascinated by the view on Trivandrum. The view of this beautiful cathedral, this most beautiful mosque and this beautiful synagogue that were actually one exactly beside the other, living in pure beauty. I mean, with the sun in the morning, it was pure beauty and harmony. And I really found that absolutely fascinating, and I was wondering, why is it that what is obviously happening in Kerala here, of this capacity of communities and religion to live and to cope together in peace and harmony, why is it that is possible here? It's such a difficult issue and problematical issue in so many other parts of the world. We indeed live in a world where dialogue and understanding among peoples and cultures and community is increasingly difficult, and just the coexistence is too often becoming a source of tensions and conflict. And according to a research that was conducted by the Heidelberg Institute in Germany, the Heidelberg Institute for International Conflict, in 2008, about out of 143 serious conflicts in the world, 108 are rooted in or are deeply involved in have a very strong cultural dimension. There is indeed not one day, 1 week where cultural tensions are not featured in the media somewhere or anywhere on the planet. Why is it that we have reached this stage where obviously cultural tensions and relations and are becoming so problematic? And this is, in a way, quite of a new phenomenon. Indeed, in less than just one generation, in less than 20 years, so this is less than a generation, the world where we live has radically changed. Some say that the turning point has been 9/11. My take is to say that it has not been 9/11, but it has been 11/9. 11/9, 1989, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, which has profoundly, in a way, contributed to the new world where we live today. And indeed, where we have moved from a kind of a very stable and somewhat comfortable bipolar world to a world that is multipolar, completely unpredictable, and multidimensional. We have been witnessing during those less than 20 years some tectonic changes, which are interconnected, one and the other, and that dramatically contribute to generate fear, frustration, stereotypes, and tensions among peoples and culture, and within our societies. I would like very briefly to try to present those 5 tectonic changes. I mean, it can be eventually more or less, but I've been trying to, to categorize those profound changes that are profoundly affecting the way people are interacting among themselves and culture among them. The first tectonic change is is that under the parallel effect of globalization of the economy and the decline of the birth rate in most countries in the Northern Hemisphere, there are tremendous flows of migrants that are spreading all across the world. And this is obviously the main, probably, phenomenon of the 21st century. And this tremendous spread of migrants across the world is profoundly affecting the cultural model, the identity, and the social cohesion, not just in those societies where migrants are migrating, but also from many societies that are sending away migrants. According to the International Office of Migration, the total population of migrants is about 250 million people and would represent in itself the 5th most populous countries in the world. In other words, the aging accelerates globalization, and as science allows us to live longer, and that most rich countries choose to have fewer children, they will increasingly rely on the more affordable labor of foreigners. And as I said, this is not just a phenomenon that is affecting, as it was during a long time, just the pattern of societies that receive migrant flows. It is also becoming a fact, an element that is profoundly contributing countries that are sending all around the world migrants. And let me also, at this occasion, get back to one other essay. So you see, I've been really trying to, take evidence base of those essays, and I see there was an extremely interesting contribution from one who has not been one of the winners, but a person from Calcutta, and I will quote. The text starts that way. It said, "One parent in every 5 works abroad," in my country, in Calcutta. One parent in every 5 works abroad. One child in every 5 studies or works abroad. And by further emphatic necessity, 1 in every 5 daughters has to be married abroad. Beside a fiancé from Kentucky, all gastronomically in debt to an Indian aunt, dishing out the delicacies. In this harmonious pandemonium, with the family tree germinating, spanning several continents, where does the Indian identity stand or locate itself? And I think this is a wonderful way to start this essay and to put forward this issue of identity in a country like India, and related to this extremely important and growing issue of migration, which is really becoming a world phenomenon. We are talking here about India, which in a way where there's probably some issues or concern about the identity, but this is also true. I remember when, in my previous life, when I was with the World Bank, I was very actively working in the Philippines, where many women, and actually young mothers, are leaving their country for years and years, and they are leaving kids who are sometimes 2 or 3 or 4, and who don't see their mother during years and years and years. And this is profoundly affecting the nature of this society, and this is for Philippines, but I guess we can look around in many other countries, and this is really becoming a very important issue. Second tectonic change is the new media and technology, which have profoundly affected the way people and culture communicate and interact, and exchange, perceive or misperceive each other. And indeed, the role of traditional media is, and in a way, is profoundly changing, and serious, in a way, analysis is eroding. And this tremendous emerging role of the new media and technology is profoundly affecting also the role of government in providing education, the role of education, the access to knowledge, the access to education, experience, the relationship among communities and families are all profoundly affected by technology and new media. And I don't want to present negative views. I'm just saying that this is a profound change. And as any change, I mean, it can propose as much opportunities as risk. And in that case, I think one of the real challenges is to see how this kind of profound revolution in the IT and new media can actually contribute to a better understanding rather than, unfortunately, this is mostly the case today, deteriorating or affecting and contributing to misperception among people and culture when a crisis is occurring. And actually one of the founding elements of the Alliance of Civilization, and I think it was very briefly presented in this video, is the work that we are doing with the media to try when a crisis is occurring, and I mean almost every day or every week, there are potential crises happening here and there, and we are trying to work to prevent those crises and to work with the media. We have a database of thousands and thousands of journalists around the world, and we are trying to anticipate and say there's a potential risk of tension in this part of the world, and be careful, try to present a balanced view. You have, as a media, a responsibility. And you probably remember, for instance, I just want to take this example, but during last summer, there was this very strong tension and potential crisis that was related to two phenomena actually that took place in the US. One was this idea of construction of a religious or Muslim religious center right on or beside the World Trade Center, and the other one was this claim from a local religious leader in Florida that he wanted to invite his followers to burn the Quran to celebrate 9/11. And for those of you who have been following the story quite closely, this person in Florida, with all my respect, was kind of a completely isolated person with absolutely no credibility, but just getting in front of a camera and say we will burn the Quran on 9/11. There was, I mean, the whole Muslim world and that was thinking that actually it was the whole America who wanted to burn the Quran on 9/11. So it's extremely important for the media to present a balanced view and also to feel that they have a responsibility, and this is the way we are trying. Trying to be really humble in the way we do the work, but trying to engage with the media and to say you have a responsibility in the same way as about 20 years ago started this notion for the corporate sector about corporate social responsibility. As a business, you have a responsibility in the community where you operate, and you take benefit of this community, so you have to give to this community. And in less than 15 or 20 years, this notion of corporate sector social responsibility has been gaining tremendous traction, and we are trying to initiate, in a way, the same process with the head of the media, and to say, you have, of course, a responsibility to contribute to information, to also to make money, to pay your journalists and what you need, but you also have a responsibility in spreading some messages, and so think about it. So this is the second tectonic change. Third tectonic change is the emergence of what we call the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, which in a way is a nice acronym, but that's actually go beyond, so South Africa and other countries that are part of this club, the BRICS. And but the emergence of the BRICS and the emerging economies, and in parallel, the decreasing influence of the Western world, which is, in a way, a major phenomenon, is that in the past 20 years, the overwhelming influence of the so-called Western world has been profoundly questioned, and we live now in a time where there's a kind of a new equilibrium. And the shift of the center of gravity of the world has been, in a way, moving from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And, I mean, we are here in Asia, and everyone knows here, but probably not everyone knows eventually in Europe or in the US, but everyone here knows that Asia is where more than 2/3 of the population are living, and where about 1/4 of the global GDP is developing, and where in less than 50 years it will represent about 40%. And I mean, those countries, it's mostly about Asia, but as I said, it's also Brazil, it's South Africa, and I mean, all this emerging world. Those countries, with their culture and their history, and not just their economy, because this is what probably is the misperception today, is that on global debate, is that people think that there's a new situation, or there's a new balance of power, and with emerging economies that wants to, to operate more massively. But it is not just an economic and financial redistribution of power. This is also, I believe, for the emerging world and the emerging countries and emerging economies, it is also to emerging countries and economies to have a seat at the table and to contribute in a way, to the remaking of the world order. The fourth tectonic change is in a way that mankind has never been bound together so closely by common interests and common challenges. And the interdependence between different countries has never been as deep as today. Let me just take one example. If you take the example of China and the US, who have established diplomatic relationship only on January 1st, 1979. It's not history. The trade volume between those two countries at that time only amounted to $2.4 billion. And at that time, what was happening in the US had absolutely little impact on China, and vice versa. And the way also the citizens from one country were perceiving the other was, in a way, of a marginal effect. Now that we have moved from $2.4 billion to last year $333 billion in less than 30 years. And China has also become, in less than 20 years, the larger creditors of the United States, which was, in a way, absolutely inconceivable. So the challenges facing the world have never been as daunting as today. We must also contend altogether climate change, environmental degradation, terrorism, drug trafficking, pandemics. No country, no matter how powerful it is able to meet those challenges alone. However, the absence of any kind of adequate global governance framework make this task of addressing and tackling those global issues altogether in a fair way. It makes it almost impossible. And it generates lots of, again, frustration and, in a way, anxiety, because people feel increasingly that, in a way, their own country is losing control on their policy and key orientation, but they feel that nobody is really in charge, and that their own interest or their own identity or their own culture is not properly incorporated in this profound change. The fifth tectonic change is that the ideological divide between the East and the West that was prevailing before the fall of the Berlin Wall has been replaced by a world today where cultural and identity divide, or by a cultural and identity divide, sorry, and a world where values, identity, religion tend to becoming the defining and often, unfortunately, the dividing factor. And so it is ironic to see, on one hand, integration, globalization, standardization, and on the other hand, revival, resurgence of religion and identity. And in a way, the sudden and overwhelming opening up and flows of goods and finances, services, knowledge, and people have neglected the human, the cultural factor. And we have a distinguished Japanese guest, and I'm actually very pleased that you could participate. This is a great pleasure to have you today. And I remember this phrase from the former Prime Minister, Mr. Atoyama, who said, "Globalism has progressed without any regard for non-economic values." And I think this is a very important phenomenon, and that's indeed we have, opened up the flows of goods, the flows of services, the tremendous economic integration and globalization, but actually the human factor is still there, and people are badly or poorly prepared to cope with this kind of new phenomenon. They have not been provided a compass to navigate this new world. So it is in that context of those, in a way, of this profound change in the world where we live, and also in the context of 9/11, as you could see, that the Alliance of Civilization has been created in 2004. I don't want to be too long on the presentation of the Alliance. I think the video was probably quite self-explanatory, and just to say that this is an initiative of the Secretary General that was initiated by previous Secretary General Kofi Annan, and has been really fully endorsed by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and it's an initiative of the UN that is aiming to improve understanding and cooperative relation among nations and people across cultures and religion, and to help counter the force that fuel polarization and extremism. So this is kind of a big definition, but in other words, to be concrete, because this is really what the Alliance is about. In a way, it is a kind of a bizarre, strange animal in the UN environment, because it is a UN initiative, so it is a governmental initiative, but really has the specificity in its mandate and in its work to engage and to work with civil society, with grassroots organizations, with the business sector, with religious organizations, with trade unions, with any constituency or stakeholder that can contribute to concrete response, because this is really actually what it is about. If you take this issue, this fundamental issue of creating intercultural understanding and cooperation, this is something where governments can do very little. They cannot do anything by themselves. If you take some of the other global issues like climate change or fighting poverty and the so-called MDGs, these are key issues where the government has to play a tremendous role. If governments are not taking concrete measures to eradicate poverty and to put more money in education, in health, nothing will happen, or not much will happen. It's the same with climate change. If there's no regulation that is agreed by the international community, there will not be reduction of CO2. The difference with intercultural dialogue is that government can claim or can encourage as much as they want, but if people on the ground are not convinced that they want to respect and they want to engage with the other, with other culture, with other communities, and with other religion, nothing will happen. And this is why the role of the Alliance is very much to create these dynamics and those synergy with grassroots organization, with those like actually GDF, like SAGE, like many organizations which are gathered today, which are engaging people, advocating for a better mutual understanding, and also innovating and inventing concrete relations. In the first forum that KK reminded us that we had this first forum in Melbourne just a few weeks or months ago, we have organized this, what was called the Marketplace of Ideas. And instead of having the essay competition, we have done this Marketplace of Ideas, and the principle was very simple, was to encourage any organization, I mean even very small organization, that was taking concrete action to bring local communities together, being kids, being sports, being business, being whatever, but that was really trying to come up with ideas and concrete and successful way to bring people together and to look together at a common objective that would, in a way, go beyond their immediate division. And this is one of the, in a way, flagship program of the Alliance of Civilization that is now, I mean, profoundly scaling up itself, you know, because we just finalized extremely interestingly a partnership with a major corporation, actually a car maker, which is BMW, which has decided to support this work of the Alliance of Civilization around the world to identify those gems of innovation and to help them to connect with donors, with partners, being the media, being policymakers, in order to scale up and to replicate. And it's really to see how a small initiative eventually that's taking place here near Trivandrum could be eventually replicated in, eventually throughout the whole country, throughout India, or eventually, why not, in Brazil or in other parts of the world. And there's, I mean, this is a program that was built on, I was saying that, I mean, my previous experience was with the World Bank and working on development issues and poverty, and the, in a way, the model that we are trying to develop or to, in a way, to replicate is the extraordinary story of microfinance and the Grammy Bank, which has been during a very long time and a very small initiative initiated by Mohamed Yunus in Bangladesh, and which could have been eventually, if nobody would have been there to say, well, there's something extraordinary happening, we should eventually replicate in other part of Bangladesh or other part of the subcontinent. Eventually, this could have been something that would have never scaled up and replicated. And in a way, this is really the ultimate model of fantasy that we are developing with this mechanism that we are putting in place that has a name that is called Wi-Fi, the World Agricultural Funds for Innovation, because this is, I mean, the acronym fits very well the objective, because the idea is really to connect innovation with a whole range of partners in order to, I mean, to deploy and to scale up and replicate. And so we are very much, I mean, getting inspired by the model, the Grammy Bank experience, and hopefully we will contribute eventually to identify some of the most innovative response, and to see, and then actually I'm taking this opportunity to make a call for, I mean, everyone here who knows or who is involved in such an initiative. We are the kind of permanently a radar screen over our head to try to identify anywhere in the world those extraordinary stories and to see how we can help them to replicate and to scale up. This is, instead of, I mean, giving you the whole catalog of activities of the Alliance, I wanted just to present this one because I think it's a very telling story. And the Alliance is working in 4 fields of activities, which are youth, education, migration, and media. For those of you who want to know more, we can discuss that further later on. But I think that I will probably went way beyond my time, and I see that Chairman Bowes is having a very dark eyes looking at me, and this guy is speaking for too long. So I will end my remark here, and really to say that for the Alliance, but also with this very wide range of partners around the world, the challenge is really indeed to build inclusive societies where, I mean, people can live and cope together beyond their difference. And I really agree with the remarks that were made before by Your Highness and Ambassador Srinivas about, well, do we really need unity? Maybe if we would just have harmony and living together, that would be probably good enough. But I think this is really the point, is to see how we can create a climate and a mindset where people can understand that they can have their own identity and belief and religion and culture, but this doesn't prevent to cope and to live with others, and that actually, getting back to this point about identity that this student mentioned before, the identity can be a kind of a multi-layer principle, and you can be sincerely, like I guess Chairman Bowes is right beside me, so who is from Kerala, and probably this is your culture, this is your identity. You have been having your career in Dubai, in the Middle East, and this is also part of your identity, and you have another part of your identity somewhere else. And I think that it's very important that everyone in this new and complex world understand and agrees that identity is not just one block, and that if you are not part of this block, you are my enemy. I think the beauty of the citizen of the 21st century, and I don't like much the idea of the global citizen, because global citizen is a bit, it's global versus local. And I think that the trick is really to contribute to a new citizen that is having this multi-dimensional or multi-layer function. And I remember, I hate using personal stories, but I mean, my whole, in a way, life and career has been very much inspired by my grandfather, who went through, I mean, he was in Alsace and in France, and he went to World War I and World War II, so it means that he wore the uniform during 10 years of his life to fight against Germany, and ironically spent, after 1945, spent the rest of his life to promote friendship and reconciliation with Germany, and particularly through the veterans. So he was bringing millions of veterans from Germany and from France together, and to try to say, okay, we have some very much common history and common ground, and let's try to to build on that. And there was a feeling. So Europe was mentioned before, that people like to choose either between being a patriot, say I'm French or I'm German or I'm British, or being a European. And there was this debate to say, well, if you, become a fan of the idea of European integration, it means that you dismiss your country. And I think it's ridiculous. I mean, you can be, and I feel personally, I'm a very strong fan of, European integration, but I feel equally French and I feel European, and I don't think there's something wrong, and I feel equally a global citizen, but I also feel equally from my own village in the east side of France. And I think that, and I feel extremely comfortable with these 4 layers, and I think this is what, in a way, the Alliance is trying to promote, is this idea that the new citizen in this global world, or in this open world, has to be in a way multidimensional. I think it's, I know it's a very difficult challenge, but there's probably no way we can ignore and dismiss this objective. So thanks a lot, and let me once again congratulate and thank the organizers and the Global Dialogue Foundation for this initiative that really must be commended and replicated in other parts of the world. And I wish the exchanges and the contact that will be established for those 2 days will contribute to the advancement of this goal, and that the unique Indian experience or Indian models can spread around the world. Thank you.